Despite its abject opposition to all that is healthy and rational, I find myself returning to World of Warcraft when I'm trying to engage in less destructive habits that I am otherwise drawn to. This is because it is, more or less, the praxis in which I truly learned what overconsumption was as a kiddo. At 12 years old, I was already sneaking up past bedtime to farm elementals in the Grand for Black Temple consumes. My feeble hands and burning eyes were just the right set for the self-induced slave labor I yearned for so deeply. Yet, I was drawn to the world more than anything, constantly staying at the bleeding edge of all the new lore from any medium possible. Books by Christie Golden, Richard Knack, sometimes, and otherwise. I played at what players commonly consider a golden era for Warcraft lore, basically anything prior to Warlords of Draenor. More than this, in my mid-teens, I was drawn to roleplay and roleplay servers. As yet more horrific, I was drawn to lore-accurate servers, hosted on sometimes illegal private servers in Europe or otherwise. Not content to simply LARP without the L and the A, I required elitist rhetoric that was constantly undermined by the fact that these supposed lore purists were usually just ripping off Game of Thrones and The Witcher before they made it into the mainstream zeitgeist. Eventually, other vices became far more engaging, and I dipped out, while Warlords of Draenor raged on. While Blizzard apparently pulled a god-tier gamer move with Legion, I was blissfully unaware at the bars reading tarot cards and getting into adventures. Then a perfect storm arose. Classic WoW mixed with the pandemic. I couched my ass into a gaming chair, used stimmy bucks to buy my first proper rig in years, and got to gaming. Ultimately, however, this spark would not really evolve into a true flame. I made it to about level 48 and returned to other activities. I showed back up for Burning Crusade, got a pre-nerf Muru kill, earned server first Lore Master in Wrath, which was disgusting by the way, and got obsessed with another game, Project Zomboid. Thereafter, I spent some time on Turtle WoW, intrigued by the idea of an extension of the classic world, like I had seen in the elitist roleplay servers, but with more grounding in the game itself. While there were several very compelling ideas introduced, the other realities of a private server made the experience less than comfortable. Sometime during my Turtle WoW adventures, the hardcore challenge started up on Classic WoW. Hardcore is a long story, but it ultimately kept me around long enough for Season of Discovery's announcement. So, here's my recap of Adventures in Phase 1. The launch of a fresh server usually requires logging into the game and staring at an empty realm list for hours on end if you want to avoid waiting in a queue to play. There was some excitement to be had staring at the list time though, as we were provided very little information about the amount of servers, their types, and even their names. So, myself and tens of thousands of other eager jackasses sat there waiting. Slowly, the names materialized, and finally the servers themselves gradually went live. My initial plan was to roll on the RP PvP server, which ended up being named Crusader Strike, with some Wrath guildies. For better and for far worse, this was also the designated spot for many a content creator, resulting in an immediate population tsunami which would prevent further character creation. I managed to get in and join the flood. To succeed in this position, though, you have to do the opposite of what the game wants you to do. Do not take quests, do not talk to anybody. Instead, choose violence from the get-go. Seek out the nearest wolf to lob shadow bolts at, and go full Aldo Leopold on those fuckers. This was really the only way to advance, and it usually came at a pace of one wolf's worth of experience every minute or two. You had to take a swing at it, and the aforementioned shadow bolts now have about a 30-second cast due to the lag, and this led to the only successful warlocks being melee for a brief time. It was mundane and obviously horrible, yet somehow it was also exhilarating. I managed to carve my way through a number of wolves, sometimes even grabbing a second spawn. However, tragedy struck and I was disconnected from the server. It is rumored that, sometimes when you disconnect, your spot in-game is saved if you log in immediately. Unfortunately, I was unable to do so and ended up trapped in the login queue. I started at position 9,000 and something in the queue and, defeated, decided to lay down in bed and let the queue play itself out. This took quite a while. After making it back in, I resumed my Crusader Strike journey for a moment before realizing I didn't really want to deal with the queues and a capped population for the next several days and weeks. Thusly, I began anew, one last time, with some friends on the PvE server, Wildgrowth. With that headache out of the way, the adventure could finally actually start, one laggy shadow bolt at a time. Immediately I was treated to a stable server and a guild tag with friends from my time on Wrath and Hardcore, to be discovered. I was able to grab quests, kill mobs without delay, and begin grinding my way through Northshire. As I was doing so, I tried to keep an eye out for hints or breadcrumbs leading me to the new runes introduced in Season of Discovery. All I really knew was that they existed, and one of them let me turn into a literal fucking demon capable of doing more than pressing Shadow Bolt. So, I camped Defias, got an imp named Pisfip to help out, and found my first rune next to an outhouse. It was only fitting that a warlock's first rune would be associated with shit. Strangely though, it wouldn't be the only one. Armed with the new power of self-healing, I continued the march to level 25. I tend to do staggered leveling, staying 2 to 3 levels ahead of mobs, so I pivoted to Dunmer after spending some time in Elune. Amidst the shorter races and all their degenerate glory, I began getting accustomed to the power of my new rune. I was pulling more mobs than usual and staying relatively efficient. Unfortunately, despite it being launch day, I was obligated to go kill the Lich King or some shit, so for a few hours I had to travel into the future to play an expansion, which wasn't as good as people remember it being. Upon returning, I felt immediately behind. My competitive nature led to an urge to try and be the first member of the guild to make it to level 25. I'd achieved this in Wrath by being our guild's first level 80, so naturally I had to continue these displays of compensatory pursuit. I made quick work of Dunmer, slaughtering its wildlife, decimating its wendigos, wiping out the local trolls, and stealing their drugs to make booze of course, finally stripping the land of all its natural resources until I eventually jumped up to level 10. Level 10 is an important level for warlocks, as this is when you get your auto-leveling pet, the blueberry that will carry you henceforth, the Voidwalker. The quest to obtain this mighty ally requires you to obtain a choker from one Serena Celadon. And so, I returned from the snowy hills of Dunmer to Elwyn Forest, melting my way through the now trivial quest mobs until I landed at Serena's doorstep. Naturally, she was camped to absolute shit, so me and the homies had to squat up and camp her bitch-ass crew until we finally got the tag. Myself and several other warlocks stuck around for multiple spawns before at long last attaining our prize. Ormgron was ready to party. At this point, I turned my attention back to Discovery. There were certain breadcrumbs for runes I wanted to follow up on, such as the soul of a critter I stole, which I'd later find out was some gnome who had it coming, because he was a gnome, and a mage. This led me to another tag war over Elwyn's #1 most wanted piece of shit, Hogger, to take his soul too. And combining them I learned the power of dodging stuff super good. I continued finding other elements of power, killing more mobs in Elwyn and Dunmer before reaching level 14 and shipping off to the lush lands of Lochmadon to end the night. On my way to the inn, however, I ran into a merchant selling some bread and pie. One particular piece of pie looked absolutely delightful, malevolently so. So I held myself to it. This led to some severe indigestion and the acquisition of a rune, the means by which I decided not to ponder further. I awoke a short 5 hours later and immediately began a circuit through Lochmadon to grab and clear quests in the area. My anticipation was that, if it all went perfectly, I could make it to 25 by the end of the night. Ormgron and I began squashing spiders, butchering pigs, and controlling the local bear population, all in the pursuit of some delicious blood sausages. From there it was on to more trogs, some kobolds, and the realization that every remaining quest in the area was beyond my current capacity. This led to a dilemma as I had two choices of where to go next, Westfall or Darkshore. According to my intel and common sense, Westfall was nearly unplayable due to the amount of people blindly following rested XP guides. At the same time, my homie Ironmane wanted to up my drip with some new pants. Being a night elf, he was out in Darkshore. The choice was made. I'd need to go through the wetland circuit to Menethil Harbor so that I could continue efficient leveling and get my Riz buffed. Warlocks have it easy on this journey, as kind servants such as Ormgron can just pull a Kevin Flynn and die for you while you wander on further. However, the usual threats were already dead. This surprised me. Were people already in their level 20s? How far behind was I? I couldn't let the FOMO get to me. I carried on to Menethil, met up with my homie, did some fishing, and then I realized I needed to go back to Stormwind anyway to train new skills for myself and the demons. While there, I made some blasting powder as well. for the day that I could make explosives. Despite my better judgment, I decided to compete for mobs in Westfall to avoid a long trek back to Darkshore. I actually managed to have quite a bit of luck here and cleared a handful of quests, which landed me at level 17. I fell behind schedule and felt the issue was my kill speed, so I went in search of more power. I only had 3 runes at this point in time, and I knew there were 9 others waiting around. I made my way to Elune and began investigating, conducting forbidden rituals, helping bad warlocks finish doing their job, and even ending up back in Dunmurra to cooperate with an inferior caster class so I could harness the power of nuclear energy. After all of this, I knew it was time to go back to Darkshore. Being level 17 with a new catalog of power would surely propel my leveling speed. And boy howdy, it did the fucking job. Within roughly 2 hours, I had jumped from level 17 to level 20. The zone had been nearly cleared in its entirety, but for a few quests up north. So I decided I would end my night right there, doing the all too familiar chores, grabbing items, killing things for more items. Yet, someone had told me there was an item of note I should investigate at the Tower of Altalax, near my target destination. Now, generally this would be sus as hell. I'm level 20, and the mobs there are level 30 plus. There's nearly no logical reason for this pursuit. Thankfully, I am extremely gullible, and made my way into the tower. I cleared outside and managed to find a surprise rune as well. This had to be a good omen. I went inside and immediately got shreked. I then ghost traveled to the top to investigate. To my surprise, there was actually something there. The Bow of Alltech, which had definitely never been a thing before. How would I get it though? There's all these mobs and... oh, hey, cool. Some dudes ran in, pulled threat, I resurrected, snagged it, and dipped the fuck out of there. The success had a downside, however. Mystery. What the hell was this stick even for? Is it bugged? Too sleep deprived and exhausted to properly speculate, I made my way to where I would begin the next day. Upon logging in, I was met with my new permanent fate, people begging me for summons. After setting a cheeky D&D message, I got to work killing Naga and grabbing artifacts. Thereafter, I went south to Ashenvale to find invisible grass and an impossible soul gem while hitting level 21. I grabbed the flight point and made my way back to Lochmadon, as it had been about 4 levels since my last foray into the Eastern Kingdoms. Lochmadon offered more trogs, more animals to kill, like quite a few of them, even more trogs, and then finally something spicy. Ogres. The ogres are elite mobs, which means they are super spicy. Thankfully, we made quick work of them. All in all, the visit to these dwarven lands got me to level 22. I came full circle with my time in Lochmadon by going back to the beginning of the wetlands circuit to kill the orcs I had found dead only a day or 2 earlier. Despite my efforts since then, I was still neck and neck with the other guild members, sprinting to 25. I decided to take a brief detour anyway, grabbing flight points in Erithai and Hillsbrad so that I would have an easier time getting a Shadowfang keep when it was time to farm some items. Once this was done, it was time to consider doing my first dungeon, the Dead Mines. I gradually made my way toward Westfall, knocking out a couple of quests in other areas on the way down. This included exciting things like preventing a terrorist attack on the Lochmadon Dam. Upon returning to Westfall, me and some dudes walked a snitch through the corpses of his fallen homies. The Kingdom of Stormwind deputized us as Pinkertons, and it was time to put this rogue labor union in the ground. The Dead Mines had not really changed at all. Some of us had new spells, but there were no like rogue tanks or warlock tanks. Mages had a new spell I wasn't paying attention to, notice it. We melted the miners into coal, had no interesting drops whatsoever, and banked a lot of experience. I was now level 23. I was essentially in the lead in my self-imposed race to 25 now, and so I decided to try and figure out what was going on with the Bow of All Tech. I felt ahead of the game having this unknown object and wanted to go further. Other warlocks had indicated similar towers may hold additional items of interest. This led to an investigation in Redridge at the Tower of Ilgalar. I found a buddy and we began our way upward. To the surprise of myself and another, there was a locked chest in the tower. We did some death-involved shenanigans and retrieved the Orb of Death. When using either the Orb or the Bow, nothing would really happen other than the item saying it required the other, even though I already had it. Stumped, I decided to take lunch before one final push. My final levels were honestly super quick. Everyone was in Redridge, so I went for the wetlands. The quests here were kill-heavy, uncontested, and generally followed a bit of a loop. I brought down many a crocolisk gnaw and many other beastie necessary, and became to be discoverers, first level 25. With that out of the way, I could begin on the real master plan, being ahead. I made my way to Stormwind to immediately power level my skills. Engineering, first aid, cooking, and anything that would make me stronger. This gave me some sick shades as well as some powerful bandages. From here, I went onward to engage in some PvP in Warsong Gulch, finding Affliction to be an absolute terror. I also went to Shadowfang Keep, grabbing Arugula's robe on the first go, experienced my first Ashenvale event, and then finally I went for the one surefire thing to cement my status as a Sweat Lord, Black Fathom Depths. This was the last day to do so before its reset, so I had to do it to him.
Got him!
Going into Black Fathom Depths, essentially completely blind, was an absolute thrill. Being the only 25 online in the guild, I had no choice but to join a public group, or PUG, with the other extreme gamers that had made it to the endgame. The beauty of this brief period of time is that no one knew what was going on. There was no perfect route, perfect class, comp, gear, any of that. You just had to play the game and work together as a team, for the sake of fun and some good loot. The first boss, Baron Aquinas, would turn someone into a small nuclear explosion that would send everyone nearby to their death and usually fuck over their damage, which wasn't great. The second boss, a giant-ass turtle, has a bubble made of watery titanium that gradually falls off, then explodes, knocking everybody away again. However, we were able to kill him after a couple attempts. The third boss was a chick with lightning powers and a homeboy ready to protect her ass. We kept killing the homeboy and his clones and gradually burnt her down as well and turned her into our bag. The fourth boss is my favorite boss. The fifth boss is some cringe-ass alliance bro who wishes he could roll shaman. He had totems that made melee pay attention to things for once, and eventually he went down. The sixth boss is Twilight Lord Kelris. Week 1 Kelris was really quite difficult. Here's footage of us dying before the meta was solved. Although we only managed to kill 5 to 7 of the bosses and I received no loot, it was valuable experience that would benefit future runs, specifically with To Be Discovered. After an extremely long day of pushing to 25, getting geared up, pushing into BFD, I decided to call it a night. Something still haunted me though. What about the Bow of All Tech? Now that I'm 25, how do I become a demon man?
Huh?
In the time since I had slept, Blizzard had apparently implemented a hotfix which allowed Warlocks and Paladins to acquire their runes tied to the Bow of All Tech and the Orb of Dez. Warlocks specifically had to complete a quest which would take them to Shadowfang Keep and Black Fathom Depths for item drops from certain mobs. I already had the item from Shadowfang Keep, but the item from BFD had not dropped on the prior night. The hotfix fixed this, albeit a day late, and I was fortunate enough to find a group of 9 other Warlocks who were just as impatient as I was. We stepped into a partially cleared BFD lockout, killed the mobs, got our items, and mostly went our separate ways. This, of course, entirely burned my second lockout, but I wanted to be a Warlock tank, no matter the cost. From here, I continued the quest, returning to the Barrens, killing demons in Ashenvale to help some portal travel guy, before finally gaining my reward, Metamorphosis. After this achievement, my time in Phase 1 was really spent on the usual loop, adventures with friends, witnessing labor riots, leveling alts, like lots of alts, uncovering fishing bot conspiracies, becoming a fishing baron myself, and all the other usual activities one engages in once they've reached the top. And yet, I wanted more.